All right, everybody, welcome back to the ATB NFL Live Show. We are back with another episode of what we're going to be doing most of the rest of the season and kind of probably into the offseason with our franchise savior program. It's the Raiders this week, and we had to have Dalton and Jake on for that. Of course, our resident Raiders fans. If you watched our betting show, you know that I will bring that up multiple times just to mostly antagonize them and see what I can get them to say about the Raiders. But they are going to be kind of leading this conversation for the most part. We'll be talking about everything that we talked about with the Jaguars last week with Zach and I. Same thing for the Raiders. A little bit different, and when I say a little bit, I mean a lot of bit. There's a lot of differences between those teams and kind of their direction and what they're going to do. But we will get into all that. But before we do that, guys, do have some NFL topics to kind of brush over and talk about at least a little bit before we jump into that. The biggest, of course, right, the Daniel Jones news with the Giants. Daniel Jones released. What's next for him and for the Giants the rest of this season? It kind of felt like it was trending towards this potentially happening before the end of the season with all of the media stuff going on right after it happens. Then the report of him playing scout team safety, which is a really funny thing.
Normal for quarterback.
Oh yeah, I know.
On the depth chart to do.
Yeah, but when
it's
he goes
funny
from
when it's Daniel Jones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Daniel Jones is out there at 6'5", just running around at safety, and it's just so funny. But yeah, it ultimately ends with him being released. Really, to the Giants' not benefit, honestly. They should have probably waited till the end of season going into next year to cut him from a monetary perspective. But things were clearly not going well in the locker room with this decision. The players know that as much as he's been a problem for this franchise for most of his time there, he is clearly better than Tommy Cutlets. Let's just put it that way. So they know that they're kind of tanking at this point. They know they're doing it for money reasons, for making sure he doesn't get hurt before his contract would kick in with the guarantees. So just a really weird situation, but also one that's not that surprising ultimately.
Well, I guess what makes it even more confusing is if this isn't a move from a monetary, if this isn't a beneficial monetary move, why aren't you sending Drew Lock out there to play? And that's where it gets even worse and even more confusing because that is also that they said, oh, from a monetary perspective, we can't have him on the field because if he plays a certain amount, we have to pay him more, blah, 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 blah. It's just so awful all around.
Just bad vibes.
Yeah, bad vibes. And I do believe that if this wasn't a New York franchise, he would still be on the roster because, as you said, Shane, a major driving force of this is the New York media and how ruthless it is up there. I mean, if this was Tennessee or some of these other teams that are really, really low on the standings, it wouldn't have mattered. But it's New York, and everybody wants success, so somebody has to go. Something has to happen.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
I think Drew Lock gives them a better chance of winning games, and I think that's why they're not starting him.
That's ultimately that's why I think I'm leaning into the tanking aspect of this too. But what do you think, Dalton?
Yeah, there was also wasn't there a contract incentive issue with Lock?
Yeah, no, exactly.
I think he already hit it, didn't he?
Oh, I didn't see that.
I don't know because I don't think he's played.
I don't think
really
he's
at all.
played enough at all to really. And the problem is, it's it would be enough games now because they're sitting or benching Jones that if they put him on the field, he would get a bunch more. And it's just out there. And this is the problem I said with it being New York is all of these media outlets. It's with Dallas's downfall this year and how much they've been in the news cycle. It's because they generate clicks. So all of these websites and all of these aggregate places are just going to find every little piece of whatever to be yo, this is just them making a cheap move because we know that the Giants are a cheap organization and have been in the past. It's just mind blowing to have it just out there in front of you. Oh man, this is kind of nasty. This is disgusting. You actually are tanking and not putting the best talent out there whatsoever.
Yeah. And I do think that's why they ended up granting Daniel Jones his release because it does make more sense financially to keep him on the roster. But I think at this point they're trying to buy some goodwill with the locker room, especially saying hey, we're at least letting him go find his own team. And letting him salvage what he can out of the season, possibly. He could still wind up somewhere. We were just talking before the show. Wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in Vegas. or who knows where. But yeah, like I think that's a big reason why they did it.
Shoot,
because
I take Daniel Jones over both Mike White, who's back there right now, Skylar Thompson.
Oh yeah, for backup
I
spot.
feel like
sure.
he'd be a solid backup for Miami.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just I think ultimately like we'll start with what's next for him. I do think it's probably taking a week, probably figuring out like what kind of offers he might have to either go be the primary backup for a team that maybe the quarterback is either not very good in the Raiders case, or their starters either injured currently, or you want to make sure you have somebody in place for that. That could be a Miami, someone like that, especially if they stick around in the race and win this week. Like something like that for him the rest of the season. Then I think going into next offseason, it's can I find somewhere that I can compete? Similar to not saying he's going to have the same success Baker Mayfield's had, but similar to Mayfield, where it's like, all right, I got to kind of find a place that will give me an actual chance to win a job and see what happens from there. So, we'll see what happens next for Jones. But ultimately, I hate to say this, but like we kind of knew this was going to be the outcome long before this was made, right? This move was made. Back on draft day, I mean, so many people were like, who?
Well,
and there's a reason for that ultimately, kind of in the case with what we've seen from him.
And I think that's why you have so much clamoring from other players in the locker room, because like whether or not anybody in the Giants front office wants to admit it, they're really just scapegoating Jones. Like, yes, he is definitely a big issue and a big part of the problems with the Giants franchise and the product on the field, but he's not the only problem.
No.
And when you guys have guys who are doing the most on your team, like Dexter Lawrence coming out and saying, hey, this is not cool, this is not fair to Jones. He's always been a professional. He's done everything this team has asked of him, and for them to treat him this way, that's, I guess, what's so upsetting about this whole thing is just like, you didn't have to go about it this way. And it's really just like egg in the face of the front office and ownership of the Giants. Like it doesn't make you look good whatsoever.
No.
Yeah, they weren't going into this year with any chance at making the playoffs anyways. I mean, that was a bottom 5 talent-wise, that was a bottom 5 roster in the league going into the season.
Yeah.
Like, it just, none of this really made sense. If they really believe, you knew they didn't believe in Daniel Jones going into the year, which is probably the most frustrating thing if you're a Giants fan or if you're a player on that team, is that they knew going into this past draft that they didn't have their quarterback of the future, and they didn't do anything to try to remedy a situation.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I go back to with this, and this can kind of be our final point on this one, whenever you drafted him 6th overall, already people not a fan of it. I wasn't a fan of it. Most people weren't a fan of it, right? He shows some flashes from time to time, but then you bring in Dable. He has a fine enough season under him in his first year. They make the playoffs surprisingly, win a playoff game. That's all great. What you don't do is give him a true extension after a season that he had. It was not that it wasn't worthy of coming back and being the starter or whatever, but you don't give him a true contract. You say, hey, listen, we're going to put, whether it's the franchise tag on you, we're going to offer you a 1-year deal or whatever it is to come back if you want to try to build upon this season and prove your worth. And if you don't want that, and if we don't want to franchise tag you, you can go elsewhere. Like, that's how you handle a quarterback of Jones's level at that point, and they didn't do that. They chose to extend him, and it made him now look like a much worse player than he would have probably been, because now he's getting paid the money he's getting paid. So, and then you have to eat this money. So ultimately, just a bad decision from top to bottom, from start to finish, and now they got to try to figure it out. And guess what? Just sneak peek, this is certainly the team that we're going to be doing next week for this series. So tune in for that. But yeah, any other thoughts before we move on here?
No, I did have a thought. While there are some obvious options that they should take, I'm totally I thought about this last night. Watch, you're gonna end up doing something dumb and taking like Drew Aller and being like, "Yeah, we got this. He's our next guy. Let's go."
Dalton might disagree with you now.
I mean, I think for a team that's clearly like several years away from contending, that's honestly a great fit, because Aller is somebody that you take I think it would be a very similar situation to the Patriots with Drake May, where you don't need him to be great right away. You just want you want to just get a stable situation for him. Take your time and build it over the next several years.
I'm just watching the likelihood of them doing that over taking Shedeur or Cam Ward. If they end up in that situation, it's just going to be oh my God, you idiots!
Yeah.
What?
We'll see what happens with that. Let's move to the Cardinals.
Yeah,
those
franchise
about them a little bit here. Yeah, for sure. We on this show not long ago were talking about the NFC West, and we most of us at least were leaning Rams, I believe, for the division winner here. Not saying the Rams are at anything close to out of it, but the Cardinals have been the ones that have kind of stormed to the front here. Currently sitting, I believe, at 6-4, unless I mistook that. Yeah. Can they continue their run to an NFC West title, which would be unbelievable considering where we kind of viewed this division coming in to the season? We knew the Cardinals should be a pretty scrappy team just because of their offense, and defense still kind of was not good, obviously, last year, but played a little bit better than maybe you'd expect with the talent level. Doing the same thing this year, but to an even higher level. Now the defense is actually palpable, kind of, or at least actually you could keep some teams below that 27 point margin, and then the offense can go take things from there. I think that if I had to pick right now, considering, I know you may be a little bit recency bias, but Cardinals are kind of rolling right now.
Well, they have a very interesting schedule down the stretch because they have 2 games against, 3 out of conference or out of division games, and then the rest are 2 games against the Seahawks, and then they end the season Rams 49ers. They do get to play the Panthers, which will be nice. They play the Patriots at home, which is nice to have it at home, and then they go to the Vikings in 2 weeks. I don't know. I was one of the people that was like, yo, I really don't feel like the NFC West is that bad, and all the teams are actually doing really well, and they all kind of are doing really well, except for whatever. Seattle is in a very interesting spot at the moment.
Niners are just all over the place for a multitude of reasons.
Niners, it's been it's just injuries like that, and you go back and look at everything. It sucks, but that's the problem for them is injuries, and they don't have the core together. I mean, McCaffrey looks all right, but he definitely does not look like he did last season.
No, he's not going to this year. I don't think.
And he's not going to. Yeah, he's never going to again, unfortunately. As much as I wish he would. I really feel like it's a race between the Rams and the Cardinals, though. And the thing about the Cardinals is I just think you have a lot, not that you don't have the ambition, but I think you have more ambition because they've been pretty down bad for a while. And now they have a squad that's pretty solid. And they're like, why not us? Why can't we be the ones to take over the division and win it and represent in the playoffs as the NFC West top team? And I think they have the demeanor and the attitude to do it.
Yeah, I think we're going to learn a lot about Kyler Murray in these next few games because, I mean, this year, he's shown his flashes like he always does, but it's been kind of pretty average for the most part this year, and that's been enough. But really for this team to take the next step, which it seems like they now have a lot of the pieces in place, it's really, can he be the franchise quarterback that we all have expected him to be? Because every other point in his career between injuries and lack of talent or coaching around him, he's had a lot of other excuses that are out of his control. There are no longer any excuses. This is really now a team that I think will go as far as Kyler Murray will take them, and it's going to be very interesting to see how far he can take this team, both the end of this year and I think beyond. This year, I do think they can win the NFC.
Yeah, I think before I want to get Jake's thoughts here in a second. I just want to mention with Murray, I think his overall season has been very good. I think the highs have been about as high as it gets in the sport, to be honest with you, especially a couple games here and there. There have been a couple low moments too, and that's kind of where you're like, all right, we need a little bit less of those. But this team, like you kind of said, Dalton, it doesn't have to be him being perfect anymore. He doesn't have to be the best quarterback in the sport that week for them to have a chance to win, like he has at times in the past. And I think they're also built to last the season opposed to in years past where they'd have these hot starts under Kingsbury and him where he'd be an MVP candidate through 11 weeks. They'd be 8-2 or 9-1 or whatever, and then they would fall off the second half. I don't think that's the type of team they have anymore. And I think that's going to help him a lot too, where if you can get 10 wins, that might be all you need in this division.
Yeah.
Like that might be all it takes to win this division. Maybe 9 wins. Like it's just, you don't know, because the divisions have been so the division in particular has been just up and down. So, but what do you think, Jake?
You don't need him to do everything, and you can thank James Conner for that.
Well, yeah. What do you think, Jake?
I think they end up winning the division. To be honest, their schedule isn't too difficult down the road. They've got 2 basically free wins against the Patriots and Panthers.
You imagine. We'll see about the Patriots. The Patriots are the one where I'm like, they might be scrappy the rest of the year, man. They might be. It might
have to worry about Drake May then, but
yeah.
I don't know. I like what they're doing as a whole. I think Gannon's done a great job, which I'm honestly really surprised by.
Yeah, I was not a big fan of the hire.
Expectations for him, so he surprised me. I like what their offense is doing. I'm going to talk more about their offensive coordinator later.
Ooh, all right, good to know. Okay,
but a part of it also is I don't think they have a huge threat in the division. I mean, the Seahawks are either going to be 8-9 or 9-8.
Yeah, probably.
They'll either be the 7th wild card team or they'll be the first team out of the playoffs. I don't think the Niners really have it anymore. They don't seem to. They
doesn't feel like it's their year. Yeah.
I will say, for them to win the division, obviously the game I'm most worried about is the last game of the season when they play the 49ers, just because the 49ers have been in that position before.
Yeah.
And they have a lot more experience in those games if it ends up coming down to the division or playoff bursts for one of the teams. But I don't see, from the Rams, Seahawks, and 49ers, I don't see a team that jumps out as really a big threat at all. I think they're all good, but I none of them really jump out to me. And I think the Cardinals are just playing really good football right now. Their come from behind win against the 49ers was huge earlier in the year, but that game kind of showed, at least me when I watched that they might be for real this year. That was the first point where I really thought that, but I do agree with Dalton's point about Kyler Murray. I am really interested to see how he plays in the rest of this season, because this really is a point where now I feel like we can really, really judge Kyler Murray as accurately as we can.
Sure. But yeah, I think again, Cardinals definitely things looking up there. We'll see if they can kind of finish things out. Let's talk about our last thing before we jump into the Raiders rebuild, doing our trying to save that franchise the best we can for the sake of our 2 friends here. Will the Colts and Anthony Richardson continue to rebound after his return to the lineup? This is a big one for me, because I think that situation, one of the weirder quarterback benching situations maybe ever, in my opinion. Like, it was a really weird situation the way it kind of came out, because it's at one point you could say, okay, well, maybe they just want Flacco to try to give him a chance to make the playoffs. It's like, okay, like if you're being really short-sighted about things, like I understand that, because this is a staff that, especially the GM might kind of feel a little bit of pressure, because it has been a long time since this team has kind of really been like super in contention, right? You could look at it from that perspective. You could also say maybe it was the fact he took himself out of the game because he was tired. Maybe that was part of it. Maybe this was like a de facto, like, not suspension, but kind of like, hey, you need to kind of get your head right. Like, you can't be doing that at this level type of thing. Whatever it is, right? Regardless of the reason for it. It doesn't work out. Flacco kind of stinks it up for 2 weeks. They put Richardson back in. And then he goes and has, granted, against the Jets team that's basically a dead fish at this point, goes out and has his best NFL game of his career, right? So at this point, for me, it's kind of like what I want to talk to you guys about is, what do you have as expectations for the Colts and him specifically the rest of this season?
So you mentioned it being weird. It is fittingly weird because he's the weirdest quarterback in the league.
Yeah, fair. Exactly.
I mean, who else drops dimes 50 yards down the field and can't complete a 5-yard out? It makes no sense.
I think that was the biggest thing about this game, though, is that he was doing that this game.
More so than he ever has.
Yes, and I was listening to a podcast earlier. I listened to Bomani Jones' podcast every single time it releases, and he had Nate Tice on there. And Tice was saying that, and when you watched Richardson play, you could tell that like he recognized what was happening, but then he would just like do an extra hitch or just be like a second too late, just to make sure that what he was doing was 100% correct and too excited. and then it would just that extra little time would mess everything up. And it looks like whatever happened over the past 2 weeks, somebody sat him down and was like, "Hey, you're seeing everything right. Trust your gut, trust your instinct, go with it, do it." And he did that this week, and it looked so much better. The hardest part with him is the same thing we talk about people like Cam Ward and stuff like that. It's just like they don't have the starts against the high quality, like especially Richardson. It's a little different, but like
he just lacks starts in general.
Exactly, lacks starts in general. Ward has the stuff with Incarnate Heart and all that, but like this year, it's his first action against like actual like ACC Power 5 teams and the week of Power 5, Power 4. Sorry.
Ward played in the Pac-12 for 2 years.
He did play in the Pac-12
for 2 years, but still, I mean, the Pac-12 outside of a few teams is not that.
I mean, the ACC
was good in their last year.
I know. That's what I'm saying. But like a lot of these QBs just really, really lack the actual experience and like ability to or like time to develop in this middle process. And you got to give them a little bit more time. And then the other thing is, like you just said, he's throwing these beautiful bombs. If all he's throwing is bombs, he's going to have a lower completion percentage because you're less likely to convert on or complete long passes. And if that's what you're throwing mainly, that's going to be less likely.
Yeah,
which is a good point. I mean, if that's all he's doing and that's what's looking beautiful, then all right, I can give you that. But you also have to be able to do the stuff.
Yeah, you need to add some more.
You throw the outs and you throw the screens and all of that. That doesn't look dumb. So it's very interesting to see what happened. I think he just has a lot more confidence.
Yeah. What do you think, Jake?
I've always been high on Anthony Richardson, and I still am. For me, I don't even really care about the passing yards in his last game, but the 66% completion rate is the most important thing. I remember the game when he took himself out before he ended up getting benched. I watched all of his incompletions.
Oh, there's some beauties in there.
I think he started.
Admittedly.
I think he started like 5 for 15 or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. It was Tim Tebow-esque.
There was a couple bad ones in there, but for the most part, it's kind of to the point of what Zach's saying. Like he's making smart decisions. He's just making them too late.
Yeah.
And
a lot of high difficulty throws, a lot of And I agree with. I think he does look more confident, but I'm still high on him. I think he'll continue to play well, and that completion rate is the biggest thing for me because that does show that he's starting. Or it's only one game, but he was at least able to do more than just the deep bombs. You know, he was able to hit the routine throws that you want your starting quarterback to make. So as a runner too, he showed off the power that you expect with it for a guy.
You just got to take what the defense gives you. The other thing is the Colts also got duped with how good they thought Flacco was, and it goes even further to show how bad Deshaun Watson is. And he was just throwing it up to dudes, and they were bringing him down. I'm sorry, it didn't work this time, guys. No. You guys fell for it.
It happens. But yeah, any other thoughts on Richardson and Colts before we get going?
So you guys are pretty high on Richardson. I am what you would call a hater, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I have the best way I can describe it is I have cautious optimism about his ability to be a starting quarterback. I think for me, the version of him that I think is reachable, that makes sense, is if he can be like a 62% completion guy and also like remain the same as a runner, he will be a top 10 quarterback because the production you could get from a 62% Anthony Richardson versus a 50% is going to be much higher, right? Because you're going to be able to get a little bit more of the easy stuff, but he'll also create a lot of plays for you that pretty much no one else on planet Earth can do except for like 3 guys. And that's kind of what makes me interested to see if he can continue this kind of career path that he just started on right now, hopefully.
Yeah. I will say I'm high on like almost every quarterback. For some reason, quarterbacks I always see.
It's like I got it. Don't worry about it.
So I'm like,
I can fix them.
You know, I'm high. Like me being high on Anthony Richardson is just me with like 70% of quarterback prospects.
I tend to have a rule, and it works for a decent amount of the time. And especially when it comes to people who've played in the ACC. If I watch the Virginia Tech Hokies dog you at least one of the times that you played them, I'm suspect.
So that's where the Cam Ward stuff comes from. Gotcha.
Oh, no. That's not that's different. That's different because he's the only player on that team doing anything. But like Drew, not Drew Lock. What's his name? Daniel Jones and Mitch Trubisky. When they went so high, I sat there. I was like, "Yo!" I watched them both get completely shut down by a mid-tier ACC program. There is no way you can convince me they are a top 10 pick in this. Absolutely not. No.
It's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah. The thing with Richardson, I think last point I want to make is that he had 66% as his completion percentage last week. That is the first time all year in which he's thrown more than 4 passes in a game and completed more than 50%.
I know.
That's my concern, and I just until he shows me that he can routinely complete more than half his passes, I will refuse to believe he's an NFL starting quarterback.
For sure, I can't really argue that point. Yeah. So
there's a very real possibility next week he looks like he did 4 weeks ago.
For sure. Yeah. So no real argument there.
Who do they play this week?
Lions. Remember? We talked about that. Yeah, I'm not expecting it to go super well this week, but that's fair.
I'll give him a pass for this week.
We'll see how it goes. But let's jump into.
Before we jump into this, and I want to say something regarding last week and the Jaguars. Look.
Well, guess what?
If a 52-6 beating does not remove you of your job, and then throughout the week there is talks of the GM remaining with the franchise, I'm sorry. Anybody who is a Jaguars fan needs to just jump ship because that franchise is not savable. There is nothing to save them. I'm sorry. The fact that Peterson is still employed is like. He doesn't even want the job at this point. He's not even giving a reason to have the job.
He's saying they need a culture change.
I know the culture change line is incredible.
It's baffling.
Shout out Eric and
tinfoil hat time.
Yeah,
tinfoil hat time. Shad Khan is doing this on purpose, trying to drive fans away from the stadium so he can justify the London move.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I don't see them moving the Jaguars to London. I just see them adding another franchise in London. I don't see them like moving one of the 32 over.
We'll see.
But I think
the Jaguars did sign I saw something about them signing a lease.
They're pretty sure they have a lease that's signed in that puts them there for quite some time.
Yeah.
We can get out of if there's anything we know, we can get out of contract.
You can definitely get out of a lease, but yeah.
No, but let's jump into saving the Raiders.
Another depressing team.
Yeah, they're trying to do so. So again, we have our resident Raiders guys here to kind of lead the show for the most part. I'm very curious what you guys think about my thoughts on everything because even though I may be a Steelers fan, as you could probably tell from my choice of hat, although sometimes, as you guys know, the hat can be different.
You don't have a Raiders hat?
I almost did, but I do not currently. I wish I had one for this one. But no, outside of the fact that I'm a Steelers fan, I am pretty well versed on most teams because I try to stay on top of everything. But so I'm curious how you guys feel about what I have to say. But we're going to start with how we got here, guys. Right? That's kind of obviously the biggest thing is why are the Raiders in the situation that they are in currently? And I know you guys will have plenty of thoughts on it, but I want to kind of jump into specifically where I think the things started to go wrong for them. And then more specifically, like what all kind of came with that, right? So I want to go back to 2016. That was the 12-4 season that seemed like it was on the trajectory to get this team back into consistent playoff contention. Right, the last time you were happy. So that season, obviously,
8 years ago.
8 years ago. Derek Carr's on a heater. The offense is on a heater. Defense is playing good enough, I'd say. I don't think that was a great defense, but it was a good enough one to kind of keep them in most games. And then Carr has his injury that takes him out for the season. I believe Matt McGloin had to start one game in the regular season, and then
he got hurt.
He got hurt. And then you had to have, I believe, Connor Cook. Was he starting quarterback in the Texans playoff game? I want to say
Connor Cook versus Brock Osweiler.
Yeah, which was an
all-time worst playoff QB matchup ever.
He also ended up playing the last week in Week 17 in the loss against Denver.
Yeah, Because McGloin got
Yeah,
hurt
because
on
that,
like the
that was
second
when
play.
I think Matt McGloin got injured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you run into that problem obviously. So it's a disappointing end to that season. Of course, like you don't want to have a season so promising fall, apart like they did. But you go into the next season, you think, okay, we had that run. Let's see if we can get stuff done. 2017 is a huge step back, going 6-10.
Big change
Yes.
though that happens because you'd think, right? You have the success you do, you don't change a thing with that offense, right?
Yeah, you
No,
think not.
we have to fire
No, you
Bill
changed the most
Musgrave
important thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
because there's this belief that Todd Downing is somehow going to be the next Mike McDaniel or Sean McVay
for whatever reason.
Even though like any other franchise, what do they do when they think they have an up and coming star, but they like their current coordinator? They let the up and comer go.
Mm-hmm.
Like every other competent organization. Nope. The Raiders have to fire Bill Musgrave after having Derek Carr.
And you guys brought in, I forgot you guys, that's the year you guys brought in Marshawn Lynch too.
Yes, who actually played well.
He
was pretty solid as a Raider.
4.3 yards carry, 7 touchdowns.
He wanted to be there.
Yeah. But probably not an upgrade over Latavius, over what Latavius Murray.
No, Murray was having a good season. But yeah, again, as you guys talked about, offense falls off, not able to replicate what they did under Musgrave with Downing. Unfortunately, that leads to, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, because let's just be, Jack Del Rio was not great head coach in general, but that leads to his firing after that season. You go into the next season here, and the thing that I mentioned specifically with it, this is kind of this is where John Gruden, of course, comes in, right? He rejoins the team after a decade, I think, in TV at that point, roughly, since the time with Tampa Bay. Yeah, so he joins the team, and that's when kind of the tear down and where you start to see things significantly change for how they're doing business with the Raiders, right?
Yeah.
Talk about that season.
Yeah, there were a lot of guys that didn't fit, and that was like one of those years where like every injury that could have happened.
Yes, 100%.
So there was a lot that went wrong, and then they decided to blow it up again.
Yes, that's whenever you start to see this team fully blow things up. You have a decent draft in terms of your first pick that year, of Colton Miller. So he plays relatively okay. He starts to, and he's still the starting left tackle of the team today. So that was one of the few hits they had in that time period. But this is where the draft starts to become a really major problem for you guys as well. You make all the moves after this season. You blow it up with Cooper going, I believe, in the middle part of that season to the Cowboys for a first-round pick. You trade Khalil Mack right before the start of the season for a package of picks, including 2 first-round picks. Unfortunately, and kind of skipping ahead a little bit, you get Josh Jacobs out of that, essentially, those picks you get for those 2 players. There's really no one else that makes any impact from those draft picks specifically. Yeah. And unfortunately, Jacobs is now pounding the rock for the Packers. So even that only got you so much. So you get all
pounding
that.
The rock,
you get all
not scoring touchdowns.
No, not scoring touchdowns. Not allowed to score touchdowns. Only yards.
They let him score one for the first time through a pass, but they said, "Sorry, bud, you don't get to rush it in ever."
But is anyone beginning to notice a pattern yet
of
jettisoning talent?
Yep. Getting rid of talent for reasons that are
not necessarily
reasons. Clear. Yeah. But no, you go into the 2019 season after jettisoning a lot of that talent. 7-9 after 4-12 first season with Gruden. Now Gruden obviously comes in, not a lot going on for that team, not a lot of pieces that fit. So he's trying to build the team in a way that makes sense more for what he wants to do. But again, now you've jettisoned Amari Cooper, you've jettisoned Khalil Mack, your 2 best players realistically. You're kind of rebuilding things from the ground up. Josh Jacobs has a really good season, of course, as a rookie. Like he starts his career off strong. This is the first year that Darren Waller is the leading receiver for this team as well. He blows up in his first full season with the team. And things are looking, I guess, a little bit more promising, obviously, coming off the 4-12 season, going 7-9. The offense plays better. They're at least getting a little bit of talent building up now. But that draft in particular, I talked about Josh Jacobs already. The 3 first-round picks, guys. Cleveland Farrell as the 4th pick.
Who's now playing for the Washington Commanders.
Yeah. Josh Jacobs, of course, great. Good job. Jonathan Abram.
Heat-seeking missile, Jonathan Abram.
Heat-seeking missile. But Max Crosby. So, pretty good 4th-round pick. Foster Moreau is still hanging around the league. Renfro, weirdly, is not in the league currently. I still don't really know how he's not in the league.
That was an ultimate drop-off. Like, he was playing some incredible
That was Josh
football.
McDaniels.
Yes. He's just, not happening for him anymore. But the draft, outside of obviously the first-round picks being, if you count Jacobs being a hit, but then technically a miss because then you just let him leave then. Overall, could have been worse, but you did get a couple pieces there for a little while, especially Crosby in particular.
Yeah, the general consensus with those years with the picks is that those first-round picks are heavier Gruden influence.
Yep.
And that the later picks are where Mayock just kind of finds his guys that he likes, because Mayock, I think, had probably – it seems like he had more freedom in the back end. Because I think Gruden probably lost interest after the first round.
Yeah, that's kind of what my thought process always was.
Just like 95% of the people watching the NFL draft.
Yeah, Gruden does not give a shit about day 3.
No. But so you move into 2020 though. You go 8-8. Offense looks pretty good. 10th in scoring in the league. Defense atrocious, absolutely horrendous, atrocious, god awful. Can't believe that you won 8 games type of bad, right? Almost 30 points a game going up. So that's a problem. However, the offense with Gruden, he's the offensive coach, that is getting better. So he's doing what you expect him to do for the team, which is build that offense up. Now this draft,
3 wide
unfortunately,
receivers.
So you get nothing out of anybody except, I would say, John Simpson in this draft.
And that's not
Henry
even
Ruggs,
on the roster anymore.
Damon Arnett, Lynn Bowden Jr., who doesn't even play for the team because he gets traded to the Dolphins, I believe, right?
I will say I hated that, and that was only because he tried to start a fight with the entire Virginia Tech Hokies team in the bowl game before that season.
Yeah, there were a lot of off-the-field concerns that came out right after he got drafted. And that's actually the not vetting players was probably the biggest hallmark of Mayock's time as GM. Was there were a lot of guys with off-the-field concerns, even Max Crosby and Josh Jacobs, they panned out, but even they've had a lot of, Max Crosby was an alcoholic, and Jacobs has had some issues with some possible, it was called reckless driving, but 4 a.m. reckless driving.
Yeah.
Hey. As somebody who hit a cow at 2 a.m. in the morning, don't underestimate that it could have just been some weird stuff.
And then talk about reckless driving.
Yeah.
The first pick of that draft doesn't work out with Henry Ruggs. Damon Arnett
does it work out either? Don't they both get arrested?
Arnett got into a pull-up off on Instagram with some random fan in his DMs, and he's literally telling him, "No, you pull up. No, you pull up." And then he makes a video waving an Uzi, threatening to kill this guy. Just absolutely wild.
And I don't think we need to bring up what happened with Ruggs because that's very well known.
Yeah, that's just
we know what happened there. But so again, that season is technically still a step in the right direction. You're getting closer to playoff contention. And then 2021 happens, which starts off okay. You're 3-2 under John Gruden, and then let's just say
all that stuff happens.
Yeah, all that happens, right? All of the things we just talked about, including John Gruden having some emails come out that let's just say we're not super professional. We'll call it is the best way I'll describe it.
And only John Gruden's.
Gruden's.
Obviously, they're terrible, but this is why. Jake, is it fair to say this is why people in the Raiders fan base believe that there is a conspiracy against the Raiders to an extent? It's stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, you are also talking to a fan of a team who believes that there is a conspiracy against them because the tampering stuff that came out.
There is a deep rooted in Raiders fandom. It's crazy. I haven't really seen it with forget NFL. I haven't seen a fan base think that the league is out to get them on such a wide basis as in the Raiders fan base and any other American sports team.
I guess you
Yeah,
guys
like,
think
it's not even.
There's a
I guess
lot
the
of
difference
Raiders
is you
fans
guys
that
think
truly
it's well,
think
not
Roger
you guys,
Goodell
but
is
the
out.
fan base thinks it's the NFL. We just think it's the media because everybody hates the Dolphins.
Well, yeah, I mean that's different. But,
Yeah, no,
The
like
media
I
doesn't
mean,
really
it's
talk about the Raiders, so we don't have enough of a reason.
Which is ironic
Yeah.
because they used to be like, and probably still are, at least globally, one of the most famous and well-known
Yeah.
franchises in all of the NFL. I mean, they have one of the most iconic logos and color schemes, even though it's just black and silver. But like, it hits.
Yeah, that's what
but the
that's
league
what 2
offices
decades of
never wanted to
consistent
promote
losing
the
was.
Raiders because they hate Al Davis
Yeah.
because he
Well,
yeah,
sued because that's what happens when you sue the league multiple times.
correct. So yeah, again, generally speaking, right? That season kind of is where everything completely falls apart from a like top-down situation. Gruden's gone now. Bisaccia comes in and does a great job of righting the ship and gets this team into the playoffs, right? Like gets them into the playoffs. The offense and defense are both not really that great statistically, but you get your 10 wins. I think your point differential was, let's just say, not super great. But again, you find ways to win games. You get into the playoffs, which, considering everything, is a huge win in terms of like culture of the team and figuring that out. Like that was really, I think, helping them kind of get past what had happened with that for sure.
Yeah. At that point, they made the playoffs with, I understand, Derek Carter's throwing the ball to sometimes Darren Waller when healthy, Hunter Renfrow, Brian Edwards, and Zay Jones.
And yeah, Renfrow has his 1,000-yard season. Waller.
That was the infamous
with
stare down in week 18. That was the infamous stare down in week 18.
It was the stare down, which is still the funniest game I've seen. In a long time.
I could not believe that was about to happen, and the Chargers fucked it up.
Yeah, they
as the Chargers do.
Yeah, that was certainly a game that happened for sure.
That was quite a Brandon Staley moment.
Yeah,
I know it was
one of the worst
incredible.
coaches ever.
Yeah, sucks really bad. It was terrible.
Has anyone ever done less with more than Brandon Staley?
I would say he's the anti-Mike Tomlin, is what I describe Brandon Staley as.
Who was before Brandon Staley?
Less with more.
Who was the coach for Brandon Staley?
The Chargers coach before Brandon Staley. Oh shit, who was the coach before?
Anthony
That's
Lynn.
my answer.
Was it Lynn? That's right. No, Anthony Lynn was.
No, they had more talent, I think, under Staley than Anthony Lynn.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. That was an all-star team they had under Staley, and
it didn't matter one
bit.
bit.
Really did less with more.
It's a true...
Also, shout out Daniel Carlson for hitting 40 out of 43 field goals that season, 2021.
Also, in that game, the Raiders almost had the worst choke out of a playoff position ever because they gave up a 15-point lead in the fourth quarter, and they were up by 8 with I think 3 seconds left, and the Chargers were at the 16-yard line. They give up a 16-yard touchdown pass and then the 2-point conversion.
Yeah,
and it goes to overtime.
Herbert was going just.
They almost out Brandon Staley.
Well, wait, no, they scored another touchdown after that touchdown you're talking about with a 2-point conversion.
Yeah, well, that was the game. Yeah. That was one of the games where Herbert completed 1 million fourth downs, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
On that drive,
we
had 4th and 7, 4th and 6, 4th and 8, and he just kept completing.
He would go 0 for 3 on downs 1 through 3, and then complete a 4th down every time. And I was like, this is getting ridiculous. I'm watching as a Steelers fan, oh shit, because I think they had to. The only way that we missed the playoffs is if they tied. So I was like, I almost didn't want to make the playoffs anyway, but whatever.
The Steelers playoff berth.
Yeah, and I'm honestly, I kind of wish you didn't after watching that game. This is stupid.
They had 3 4th and 10s.
Yeah.
He completed on the final drive. He converted 2 of them, and they had 1 converted for defensive holding by. I don't even think it wasn't even on the target. So
at that point, they don't even know. Yeah. No, but so again, you have that season happen, and I remember whenever that happened, I was like, man, is Bisaccia going to be the guy at least for some amount of time? Are they going to let him kind of take over the team? Especially because if we think of all the controversies and all the issues that they had, might be a good way to kind of settle things down.
Absolutely insane year. If you just look at the year as a whole.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe they're just gonna, this is a team that isn't super flush with cash with the owner. maybe he doesn't want to pay like another coach like a ton of money to try to come in and do this. It maybe takes some time to let things settle down. And then we enter the Josh McDaniels era, if you want to call it an era, if you can call a season and a half an era.
Josh McDaniels 2, the Electric Boogaloo.
Yes. A lot of big moves in 2022. You go get Devontae Adams to play with his college quarterback. Fun.
The best quarterback in the league.
Which I just want to say, if that's the only major move they make that offseason,
fantastic.
Things are very, very different.
Exactly. But you make that move, you go out and you get Josh McDaniels, who's ready to be a head coach again. He wants to do this thing, right?
And change GMs.
Yep, you get a different GM in there. Let's just say Dave Ziegler.
Are we noticing a pattern of like every 3 years completely changing the way the organization?
Yep, and usually after a really good season, you change something drastic. Fun. Yeah, so McDaniels is 6-11 first season, not awesome to say the least.
6-11. I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, Shane.
No, that's why you're here. Yeah,
4 games I think that they had a 14-point lead in blue, or maybe it might be 10-point lead in blue.
Seems about right to me. Matt Collins is your number 2 receiver on the team.
Because
that's fun.
Why bother use Hunter Renfrow after giving him a giant contract? Why bother use Darren Waller after giving him a big contract?
Because Darren Waller doesn't want to play football.
He played 9 games that year, so it is a little bit iffy there.
Hunter Renfrow had that fumble in overtime against the Cardinals that they picked up in return for a touchdown, and after that, Josh McDaniels never gave him the ball again.
Yeah. He played 10 games that he did. Yeah, it was bad. I remember that one.
Yeah,
probably was not a legal hit, but that's a whole other thing.
No, but in the 10 games Renfrow played that season, only got 5 targets a game. When you're the like hyper slot, like quick separation guy, like you don't love that being not. And you'd think with McDaniels, if anybody, who else knows how to use a white wide receiver in the slot?
Well, what are we talking about? So here's what happened there. So going back to like when Renfrow was with Gruden, he struggled out of the gate with Gruden, and it took a while for Gruden and his staff to realize we need to just give him a loose framework of what to do, and then just let him find his way to get open as far as his release and stuff goes.
Yeah.
And my guess is that with McDaniels, it was you have to do it this way. Everything has to, all the routes need to be run
does make sense.
Exact way.
Yeah.
And the
Patriot way.
It wastes him.
The problem is you don't have Tom Brady in the pocket anymore.
That doesn't help either. But ultimately, that season is a wash. You're 6-11. You go into the next season, right? He's fired halfway through the season after starting 3-5. So you've now gotten rid of your coach that you didn't sign Rich Bisaccia to come and take over after the season he had and replace Gruden. You've now fired that guy a year and a half into his tenure. He finishes 9-17 as head coach of the Raiders. And then you hand it over to Antonio Pierce, who, to his credit, rallied the team a little bit, got you to 8-9. Aiden O'Connell was one of the quarterbacks of all time that season.
Yes, because Josh McDaniels put his career on the line in the Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right, you bring in Garoppolo. I didn't even want to talk about Garoppolo because what's their talking
but I mean
about,
that was the major move in the offseason. Like we talk about the major moves, and the major move that offseason was we don't want Derek Carr anymore. We're going to replace him with Jimmy Garoppolo.
And Carr's also very important with the contract they gave Carr. Found a way to get absolutely nothing for
had to cut his ass
for an average NFL starting quarterback. Like
you should get
real nice to give him a no trade clause. That was real.
Yeah, that was fun.
Giving Derek Carr a no trade clause is
incredible.
Hey, it's okay. The Saints paid for it in the long run.
Yeah. The Saints are they're having a good time over there right now. No, but so you move on from Carr. You give him off to you don't give him off to anybody. You just let him go, and he goes and signs with the Saints, which is fun.
To another absolutely ridiculous contract.
Yeah, the Saints. No contract's ridiculous for the Saints, Zach. Let's be honest about it. But you bring in Garoppolo, who's supposed to be, I guess, a holdover. I don't know if he's supposed to be a bridge. I don't know if he's supposed to be. I don't know what the thought process, long term.
The thought process is that they needed someone to run McDaniel's offense exactly the way he wants it run.
Of
because
course.
McDaniel's wasn't the problem. It was the personnel that they had just all given a bunch of giant contracts to and now realize, oh, they're not that good.
Right.
It can't be McDaniel's offense.
It can't be his fault. And then Garoppolo proceeds to absolutely blow ass all over the field. And then, gets hurt and also just isn't good. So they throw in Aiden O'Connell, who tries his best, is the way I'm going to describe it.
Yeah. Years of evidence and tape to show that Garoppolo
Right. He plays in maybe the most quarterback-friendly offense in the history of the sport and is only sort of okay most of the time. So then you have O'Connell come in and he plays valiantly. Is much more fun to watch, admittedly, than Garoppolo, especially throughout that season. And Antonio Pierce does a good job in the similar way that Bisaccia did whenever things blew up in that season in 2021. So the question then becomes: Are they gonna do it this time, guys? Are they gonna be like, yeah, let's give the guy who came in and kind of sort of almost saved our season the chance to build things up? The players come out and they want him to play there. They want him.
They end up not getting a choice.
And
here's the difference. Here's the thing. So he's trying to write this. Mark Davis trying to write this wrong. But the problem is, Antonio Pierce had less success than Bisaccia did with a better roster and not nearly as many horrible things going on. Also, Pierce way less ready to be a head coach than Rich Bisaccia was at that point in their careers.
I agree.
And unfortunately, Bisaccia didn't have the probably best or second best player on the team saying, I won't play any games if you guys don't keep Antonio Pierce on the roster.
Crosby didn't say that, but Crosby and many players in that team regularly expressed how much they loved Coach B. That's what they called him. I
definitely thought that he had put it a bit more like
there was a report, I think, that said that he didn't say the quote. He was very, I want Antonio Pierce to be my head coach. He definitely said that.
Yes.
But somebody, I forgot who it was, but there was a report that he would request a trade. But we don't know if he actually he didn't necessarily say that he would.
Okay.
My guess is he probably felt like he had to at least insinuate or threaten that because last time they screwed it up so much.
And that very easily could have been just a ploy to try to get.
And like you just said, Walton, though, unfortunately, this was what Mark Davis trying to make up for the wrong, but it wasn't the right time to make up for that wrong. This was the time to actually have the head coaching search and not retain the interim head coach.
Correct. And now here we are, sitting at 2-8 on the season with the Raiders. You've traded away Devontae Adams. You've pretty much cleared house as far as the guys that you don't think are going to be on this team moving forward, for the most part, except for your couple key pieces you have. And now we move on and see what we can do moving forward. And that's where we come in, right? This is where we step in moving forward. We've handled all the stuff that's happened in this team. We've covered all the stuff that is important about why we're here. Let's see how you guys, specifically, of course, you and Jake and Dalton, of course, and also Zach and I trying to do our best as well. How are we going to get this team closer to where we want them to be? We're going to start with the coaching staff and any front office moves. Now, I don't expect any, and you guys can let me know if you agree with this. Jake kind of agreed, I think, earlier before the show, but not expecting any major front office moves of any kind. As far as GM, of course, Telesco is going to be the GM. Probably not expecting a ton of changes from that perspective.
No, but Telesco should have zero involvement or very little involvement in the head coach search.
I do agree with that. But I don't think any major changes are coming to how the front office is organized.
There was one name that I didn't. That's why I asked my question to you two before the show about what we thought about the GM and head coaching staying power. And it's when I was doing some research, because I was just doing it all. It was a very interesting thing that I noticed, but we kind of did talk about how when Gruden was there was some positive team building and bringing in guys to make an impact. And one of the people who, whether it was rightfully or not, got pushed out of Las Vegas was Reggie McKenzie, who's right now with the Dolphins and helping them with acquisition. I don't think he would make a lateral move, but if that position opened up and then we talk about Telesco, it's probably staying. I don't know if he would want to go back and look at a reunion. I don't know if it would be an opportunity, but having somebody with a clear mind of actually like from the football, like putting a team together and talent acquisition could be worth it. I mean, that wasn't necessarily a bad part in the Gruden era.
Yeah, I don't see
make the lateral move. Yeah, I didn't know if the reunion would be open or not, but
I don't. Yeah, that is an interesting thought, but I don't really see a world where Mackenzie. I don't know why he would want to come back.
Yeah, I don't
be
think
honest
so.
with you.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Yeah. So then my next question for all of you, and this is a big one, and Jake already mentioned, and I think Zach, you already mentioned too, is your thoughts on this. Are we making a head coach change this offseason if you guys are running the team? So Jake, I know you said you're going to be operating with him as the head coach, right?
I'm keeping Pierce.
And then Zach, I think you said you were not, right?
Yeah, I just think it's been too inconsistent. And as Dalton said, like just a little bit ago, I don't think I think he could be a head coach in the future, but I don't think he was ready yet. Just based on some of his comments he's made in pressers, and I just feel like he's going to end up doing more damage to a franchise than good right now. I'm not saying that he couldn't be a coach in the future, but I think right now is not the best time.
And what do you think?
So I don't think so, and because I know it's his first year, but looking at what a head coach does, especially one that doesn't call plays,
yes,
there's three things they need to do: manage timeouts, manage fourth downs, other situational football like that, and they need to get the locker room ready to play their best football.
Yeah, motivation,
get buy-in from the team, motivate. And he has failed at all three of those things, and he has really failed at all three of those things and has not shown improvement despite having a team. Oh yeah, also bringing in a staff. Really has not assembled a great staff either.
No.
The people that he's brought in to advise them are all kind of dinosaurs
past their prime. I'll say it's past their prime is the best way to describe it. Yeah.
Their prime wasn't that great to begin with for many of them.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. And as much as I want the instability to stop, something this year has to change. I think the roster's not terrible, and I think Telesco's a solid enough GM. You got to make a change somewhere, though, when you have to kind of and it's got to be the head coach.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with you, Dalton. I do have a full staff breakdown of some different guys that I'd be looking at potentially if I was running the team, right? So let's actually jump in with that. And I want to start with Dalton here then, because Jake, I know you're not making like wholesale changes to coaching staff in any way. Dalton, who would you be looking at? And we'll start with like who you think your first choice would be. If you were looking for a head coach, who would you be making that first call to?
So because of what I have planned at quarterback, which we'll talk about later when we talk about the roster, but my first call would be Cliff Kingsbury.
Okay.
That was the guy they wanted to bring in as offensive coordinator. Pierce screwed that up because Kingsbury wanted 3 years, and Pierce is like, bro, I'm not getting 3 years.
Yeah, well.
That's literally what happened. Pierce had a 2-year deal.
Do you think Gardner Minshew had anything to do with Kingsbury choosing Washington? I think that the possibility of Jaden Daniels and Gardner Minshew could have had... Yeah.
I heard it was the wanting 3 years as a big part of it. But I'm sure if they had a quarterback, he might have been a little more flexible.
Yeah, it'd be different.
Because he also knows, like, with where he's at in Washington, he knows he doesn't need to be there for more than 2 years. He's going to have his pick of head coaching jobs this year, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So that'd be your first choice, right, for head coach.
Yeah.
Who would you be looking at if he's not either available or if you're not able to get him to sign on? Who do you think you'd be looking at next?
I've heard whispers about Vrabel possibly being a contender, and I don't hate that. My only issue is I think then you got to retool the defense a bit, because I assume you're not keeping Patrick Graham then if you're bringing in a defensive-minded head coach.
Probably not, yeah.
So that's kind of my only issue there. But again, I still think Vrabel would be an upgrade over Pierce. I think most coaches in the league right now, most of the real contenders, would probably be an upgrade over Pierce. even I'll say this, even Deion Sanders might be an upgrade over Anthony.
Well, I think
Sanders is a possibility. Like it's not. I don't think the chance is zero.
Right.
Let's put it
I
that way.
wouldn't put it.
I'm pretty sure he just doubled down on Boulder, but I know
right.
that.
But coaches say that shit all the time.
I know.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little bit harder for him to go back on that than a lot of other people because it'll fly in his face a bit harder with that. I mean, he already had a major, not like just pushback when he left Jackson State, and like that was a little rough. If he doubled down this time and he does it again, he's not going to be looked at.
Here's the question: is Shiloh a senior?
I believe so.
Okay, so Shiloh's going after this year.
I want to say
I know Shador is.
Yeah.
So he's gonna have nothing tying into that program though after this year.
That's true. Yeah, we'll see how things play out with Deion. But Zach, I know you also have thoughts on the head coaching options here. So who would be your first call? You think you'd be making?
So I mean, well, Cliff Kingsbury is a good idea. I thought it might have been too soon for him to be a head coach again. And one person I felt like could possibly be a draw who some people might think it's too soon for him to be a coach again with the pieces on the defense is Brian Flores, especially with this change that he's had. I would say for you two, though, my main concern if they were to make that decision is who the hell is going to be the offensive coordinator, because that was the biggest issue in Miami, and he hasn't had to do any of that with Minnesota. So that would be my only concern of bringing.
I'd hope he'd pull someone from Minnesota maybe that wants to have a chance.
You would hope.
Plays,
I mean, but I don't know. I don't think. And again, Miami is a weird place, and they have their own issues with their front office and ownership. That's whatever. So I can kind of understand why he had some issues, because it's not an easy place to. I mean, even McDaniels had some struggles with the past few seasons with his offensive and defensive coordinators. But it just depends on, like I said, it just depends on who you get in to bring in to be offensive coordinator. And I don't necessarily have those names, but as far as a defensive head coach to come in. And I also thought about Vrabel. I also would be a bit, I don't know if you want to be wary about this or it would be a good thing, but with Brady there, I wonder if he's like, hey, what about Belichick? But
I don't think Brady would want that, actually. From everything I know.
As far as a successful, like getting
a
franchise as a successful program and getting it back on track, that's what he could give you. And I think it depends on what my biggest question about Las Vegas and Raiders over the past 8 years has been, what is the direction of the franchise? What do they want to do? Because it's never seemed clear. It's never seemed like there's been a straight vision of we want to become a contender. It's been, look at this shiny thing over there.
When you look at the league, just the landscape of the league, and you look at the consistently good teams like the Chiefs, Steelers, Packers, Ravens, all of these teams have an identity, and they have a way that they want to play the game of football. And the teams like the Raiders, who continue to lose, change their identity every 2 years. I mean, you can't have any, like when Shane was going through since 2016, the history. You have Jack Del Rio, and then it flames out after 1 year. And what does Mark Davis do? He pays $100 million to John Gruden.
Yeah.
To change the team, and John Gruden obliterates the team, and he did a decent job bringing it back up, but he now he's like, okay, this is my franchise. I want them to play football my way. When that doesn't work, Davis brings in Josh McDaniels, who then guts the team and wants to make things the Patriot way. You can't I don't know. There's one clear reason why the Raiders don't have success and why they won't be as good as any of the teams I named until they start to have some stability. And it's the fact that they just change their identity every 2 years.
Yeah, you can't gut the roster, the coaching staff, and the front office that much. Like those teams that you mentioned,
3 times a decade. That's insane.
Yeah, the teams you mentioned, they all have somebody that's been there. Pretty much every team that's won a Super Bowl in the last 10, 15 years has somebody that's at least one person that's been a steady part of the organization the whole time. There's been some continuity. they keep their stars. They either keep a coach or a GM or something, like they do something, and the Raiders haven't done that. And that's been going on for as long as Mark Davis has run the team, and even before that. Now, under Al Davis, you could justify it because it was a man who knew he was at the end of his life, chasing glory one last time. Mm-hmm. He was throwing shit at the wall, hoping something stuck. It was sad, but you can respect it at that point. He knew he was at the end, and he was just trying. Mark Davis has no excuse. This is just a fickle man who has no business running an NFL organization, because at least Al Davis did understand football much more than Mark Davis does. And honestly, it seems crazy to say, but really it is hard to see this team turning things around as long as Mark Davis is making the bulk of the football operations decisions.
Yeah. Well, and another fantastic example of what you guys are saying, ironically, is Washington, because there's only one stretch of time when they've been competent, and it was because Joe Gibbs had an identity for that franchise and had a winning culture. And outside of that, it's been an absolute disaster. And because they don't have anything, it'll be amazing to see what happens with them now. And if this is just a flash in the pan, and hopefully it's not. But Miami, since the turn of the century, and not having anybody to support Marino at the end of his career, and just cycling through coach after coach after coach and GM. I am personally amazed that Chris Greer has lasted as long as he had in this franchise, because he's the lasting piece of all this kind of disgustingness. But a lot of these franchises just don't. It's this chase, like you said, to get glory, and most of them don't have the excuse of, I don't have a lot of time left. It's just, this is going to make me money. And they just do whatever they can to make money, and it just flies back in their faces. So that's been my biggest question with Las Vegas for the longest time, is when are you going to lock in and say, this is what we're doing, this is how we're going to get there? And that it's an issue of how everything has become a money-making thing, because you want those results as fast as possible. It takes longer than 1 or 2 years sometimes, when you've done irreparable damage to the actual ability to build any sort of actual team or lasting presence, identity, or depth, anything. You don't have anything.
Yeah, and that's kind of and I have, just to finish off the staff stuff here, I have 2 full staffs that I built out, head coach, offensive coordinator, defense coordinator. I want to kind of throw out to you guys thoughts on, especially obviously Dalton and Jake here. One angle I took was, focusing on the fact that you're probably, or hopefully at least, drafting a young quarterback that you're hoping to make your franchise quarterback this offseason, right? That's one angle, and that's still going to happen in my other angle most likely too. But one is specifically with that in mind and trying to maximize that. And the other one is more of the get somebody in the building who you hope can build a culture that can consistently sustain itself and win, right? That's kind of the other one. That's the focus of it here. So I'm curious which one you guys like more, which one you guys like at all. Hopefully one of them, we'll see. But my first choice, if we're going off of the offensive-minded way and trying to build this offense up with a new quarterback, I actually like the idea of going out and giving Liam Cohen a chance, the offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's done an excellent job in his season with the Buccaneers this year, considering the injuries as well. Before the injuries, they were a top 5 offense in almost every metric. The run game had kind of been fixed after years of struggling there. Baker Mayfield was playing the best football of his career. And even since the injuries to wide receivers, he's been able to manufacture offense. The offense hasn't been as good, obviously, but they've been able to remain competitive offensively. It's really been more the defense has kind of been a problem for them a lot of the time. I think he'd be a really good fit in terms of just building an offense that has a lot of easy stuff in it to get a young quarterback off the ground quickly, right, and try to build his confidence up. I think I would bring in for his offensive coordinator someone he worked with the Rams, currently the pass game coordinator of the Seahawks, Jake Peetz, who's also a former Raiders quarterback coach back in the day, actually, not about, I think, 2016, 2017, somewhere around that range, just quarterback coach for you guys. So that would be an interesting mix.
During the history.
I think it would have been 17 specifically.
Because 16 Downing was the quarterback's coach.
That's right. Yeah. So 17. Pete's ended up being the quarterback coach for you guys for a bit there. So then for DC, I think like Patrick Graham obviously is someone who I'd be interested in keeping around. I think, but assuming you don't with the new staff coming in, the name that Steelers fans would know, Larry Foote, currently the pass game coordinator, inside linebackers coach for the Bucs, has been doing a really good job for that position group and has kind of built his way up through the Bucs organization over the past 6 years or so. And I think he might be somebody you could pull away from there and kind of build a defense over this way. So that would be what I would do for that kind of setup with an offensive head coach there.
I like it. And Bowles' disciples have done well as defensive coordinators. Yeah. His tree is pretty strong.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Jake?
I like it. Yeah.
My other setup I had was more towards like that. It's defensive in this case, but more so just like culture building thing. I think this guy could bring some of the culture that's working really well up in the NFC North right now. Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, having an excellent season with the Lions right now. Of course, they've built a great system with the Lions, both offensively and defensively. Offensively especially, but defensively they've also done a really good job, even with Hutchinson injury. Top 5 in points allowed right now. They've been able to create a lot of turnovers in the secondary with the safeties. Just doing a lot of good stuff, of course, on the defensive side of things. And I think he would bring just some of that culture that hopefully that has developed with the Lions, right? Because that's something the Raiders need, something sustainable, like you guys were talking about, something that they can hopefully build upon and then continue on with, despite all of the crazy turnovers that they've had at times. And I think he'd be a good fit for that. You could also slide in like Mike Vrabel, you guys talked about, someone of that ilk that can hopefully bring just some accountability and professionalism to the spot, right, that they haven't really always had at that position. If we go that direction, I'd want him to bring someone over from the Lions to run the offense, specifically passing game coordinator Tanner Engstrand. He's a guy that's been talked about as offensive coordinator potential for other teams as well. Ben Johnson might take him with him if he ends up going somewhere, but I think that he might like a chance to actually call plays if he's going to be doing that, so he might take a job with Glenn if he does get a job somewhere this offseason. That would be fun. You could bring that type of offense over. I think it'd be a great fit for one quarterback in particular that I know you guys might be interested in having be a Raider. And for DC, I kind of, because Glenn is the defensive coach, not sure if he's going to call the defense all the time, but if he does, I think someone that has defensive coordinator experience and works with him would be a good fit just to kind of come in and help him. I pegged Jim O'Neill. He's the Lions defensive assistant, or a Lions defensive assistant. Has experience as a defensive coordinator for the Browns in 14 and 15, the Niners in 16. He's done this job before. He kind of knows what goes into it. Probably be a good voice in the room with him. Or I will say this, if this guy's looking for a job, would you guys consider Dennis Allen coming on as the defensive coordinator for the Raiders?
Yeah.
As defensive coordinator, yeah.
That's another thought I had with Glenn, because they obviously have that connection with the Saints. So
Now, the only thing with that is schematically it would be a bit of a retool, because Allen is much more of an aggressive defensive play caller, whereas Patrick Graham obviously is very conservative in his defensive play calling, and and it's kind of more of just a bait and pick your opportunities type of defense. So it would require a lot of retooling. Now the defensive roster is in flux right now.
Right. So that's kind of one of the reasons I was interested, because I do want them to go more, I think, in that aggressive nature to me personally. I'd rather them go in that direction if I'm choosing a direction.
Personally.
That's personally for me, though. Yeah. So
I don't know. I've come around to Graham's defense over the last couple of years, but I still don't like it aesthetically.
Yeah. So we'll see, but that's kind of the two setups I kind of landed on after spending some time looking around the league. I think either of those would be, let's just say, a pretty marked upgrade on what they have going on right now with Antonio Pierce. Other names I threw out, I was like, I don't think this is anywhere close to being where Ben Johnson ends up, but like, of course you have to make that phone call. Maybe you have Tom Brady get on the phone like, hey, listen, Ben, listen. Hey, I know what I'm doing. Don't worry about it. We can figure this out together. Outside of that, I don't think there's anything going on there. Vrabel, you guys mentioned too, and then a guy that I feel like he's a better fit for other teams that kind of need somebody to kind of just come in and maybe settle things down. But I want to see Todd Monken get a shot at some point. as head coach. I don't know if this would be the best fit necessarily, but I would be interested in something like that too, as kind of an offensive guy. But
they would need to make some massive investments in the offense for that, I think.
Yeah, which they should anyway. But the point is, he's a guy that'd be interesting.
Yeah,
to me too.
But I just don't feel like you have a lot of pieces there right now for him to feel like that's an attractive destination.
Yeah, we'll see how much interest he gets anyway. But yeah. Any other names you guys want to throw out there? Anyone else you were interested in?
An OC to keep an eye out for if they do what I hope they do in the draft would be Pat Shurmur.
Right.
Especially if you bring in an offensive-minded head coach, because I don't know if I would want to rest my franchise on Pat Shurmur running his own NFL offense.
But being a voice in the room, I think would be fine.
And him like relaying someone else's NFL concept, like someone like Cliff Kingsbury, him relaying Kingsbury's concepts to a quarterback that he's worked with throughout in college.
Yeah.
That could be a pretty good fit.
Yeah. I agree. But yeah, that would be an interesting one too. Let's jump into team needs here. Now I have a bunch for this team because there's a lot of free agents that you have to factor in. There's a lot of spots that are not strong anyway, regardless of who you bring back or don't. But I want to start. Let's start with Jake here. What would be? And I have a long list of team needs, not in particular order, but if you had to give me your top, let's say 3 biggest needs on the roster through free agency and draft that you want to try to resolve, what would they be?
3 big. Well, number 1 is quarterback.
Of course, have to start there.
Number 2, I would say finding a number 1 wide receiver.
Okay,
would be my number 2, and then number 3. Just defensive back in general.
Okay. Makes sense. What do you think, Dalton?
So, I think quarterback obviously is like
right. That's you got to start with that.
Number 1. I mean, a year ago we were talking about this team being a quarterback away.
Yeah, and they still are. Let me put it that way.
But now
I mean, they're definitely a quarterback away and a couple more pieces.
Well, now,
now especially,
But like, I mean, looking at where they were a couple years ago, or like like last offseason with the way the defense was, assuming the defense made more strides. But anyways, my number 2 need I think is actually running back. I think
that was my number 4.
Yeah, I mean, Zamir White's bad. I mean, Zamir White might have worse vision than Trent Richardson. Which is it's bad. It's not just really bad. And also, like, I don't consider receiver as big of a need because I think they might need more of like a 1A or just any type of outside threat, a guy that can go up and get the 50-50 balls. I don't know if they necessarily need a true number 1 because the number 1 receiver is Brock Bowers.
Right. That's you have to factor that in a little bit. But
I think the third biggest need, I'm going to go defensive back as well, but specifically they need a true number 1 corner, I think, to complement Ja'Cory Bennett going forward. I think Hobbs is fine in the slot, but I don't think Jack Jones is a true number 1 corner in this league. I just don't buy it.
Yeah, too
inconsistent. If Pierce is gone, I think Jack Jones is that was the one person I think was able to get the most out of him as well.
Right.
And I just don't see that sticking if he's not in Pierce.
Zach, do you have any different ones you want to throw out there? Or do you kind of in lockstep with that?
So I was going to obviously quarterback 1. My only amendment to the 2 of you is combining your 2 into my number 2 need and just finding another playmaker that is a dominant, whether it's a wide receiver, whether it's a running back, whether it's whatever. Because you just said, Dalton, we have Brock Bowers. Like that's there. You have him as a incredible weapon, and you saw it last week against Miami when he was just it could not be stopped. Jacoby Myers is also solid and is a very good wide receiver too. And just needs somebody to take the pressure off of him having to be the main guy and getting the focus of the best corner or the best protection that the opposite team has. And then while Madison isn't bad, it just seems like they don't trust him at all and they don't want to give him the ball that much. But he's a complimentary back anyway. He's not a top back anyways. And the rest of the people are, they're guys in the league.
Trey Tucker, I think if you put an actual quarterback in that offense, I think Trey Tucker will
He
be something.
could definitely be the primary deep threat for them,
Yeah.
especially. I
It's
think.
just you need a quarterback capable of throwing the ball down the field.
Yes, which they
and then
do not have.
and I agree. Secondary is a very, very big need for the third area. Ironically, though, I'm not worried about the front seven that much. Like, there's some solid talent in the front seven.
Yeah, I think for me, I'll just give you my full list because again, I'm kind of looking at it, and some of these are more so like needs in the sense that you need to add bodies to this room, not necessarily like impact players to this room, but you have to start with quarterback, running back, of course, receiver, specifically outside receiver help just to kind of get more bodies there, particularly hopefully somebody like you said, Dalton, that can be a ball winner type on the outside, opposed to somebody like that. Corner, really big need, I think, especially like you said, to kind of that primary starting outside corner. Interior defensive line, I think, could use some bodies because I know they have free agents, in that spot. You have Wilkins in there as like his primary guy, but kind of add some more beef there. And then I think with Crosby there, it helps, and then you kind of go from there. But I think you should probably try to add an edge player that you're comfortable starting if you have to. I'm not a big fan of Wilson at this point. Still, Tyree Wilson.
Well, if it was up to me, I would still just put Wilson on the inside and just bring back Malcolm Kuntz.
Yeah, Kuntz is a guy that I would like to see come back, but I think if you add somebody else to that room that can, because we've seen what happens when Kuntz isn't available. Like I think that having someone opposite of Crosby that is either just an impact player potentially, or even just somebody that you feel comfortable playing a lot of snaps if you need him to, would be a big help to the edge position in general.
Yeah, I think generally, like when we're talking about the defense, like I think the number one like need after quarterback, really almost in free agency, is retention. Is just bringing back a lot of the guys in the defense. That's got to be the top priority.
Because like even like linebacker, like you want to bring back Spillane, I'm assuming, just because he's been good for them. Like on his cheap contract, he's not going to cost a ton.
Don't not mention my man Diablo because
Diablo as well, of course. Yeah,
like it was a suspect pick for a secondary position because he was hit or miss sometimes, but my lord, he has blossomed into a fantastic linebacker. And
I'm a big Divine Diablo fan.
Right.
What and also in all top tier all name team for the first team all name in the NFL, Divine Diablo. Give me a break.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, at linebacker, I think you bring back Spillane and Diablo, and then I think the odd man out there is going to be Luke Masterson. I don't think he's going to get another deal, but that's why you drafted Tommy Eichenberg this year. Mm-hmm. And he can kind of fill that role as the third linebacker.
Yeah, and you hope one day soon you can be the other linebacker with Diablo because Spillane is obviously not particularly young. You're probably not going to sign him to a long-term contract. Yeah, which, I mean, linebacker nowadays maybe you can get away with it a little bit. But, like, we'll see. He'll be 30 next year.
He is 28.
Well, he's 29 according to the roster right now. So.
Well, no. He is born December 14th, 1995. So he is 28. He is not 29 yet.
He'll be 29 in 3 weeks.
He'll be 29. He'll be 29 this year. But no,
we're getting close. All right, I'm trying to hold off 30 as long as I can.
There you go.
Someone else turning 29 in a few months, like
I turned 20. I'm turning 28 in March, so that'll be fun.
2 years, and I'm trying to hold it off.
Yeah, everybody does. But now that we've talked about the team needs, let's get into free agency in particular, right? And we'll talk a little bit about draft plan. I told Zach I promised we would not do anything too crazy.
This one's easy because I mean, for your main draft need, I don't think you're going to go for free agency with this, but you're going to go quarterback. Like,
and we'll definitely talk about that for sure.
Yeah, and because there's not a free agent quarterback that I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh yeah, let me sign him to take over this team. Like, there's just not one that's out there.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about that. I have a draft plan part.
On that, real quick, I do think like last year I was pounding the table to trade for Dak last offseason. I don't think that kind of trade makes any more sense with where the team is now.
No, I don't think so either. So let's just get into free agency. So I have my primary free agent targets. I have many because this team has a lot of money and a lot of potential holes they may want to fill with free agency and then also the draft. So obviously everybody I talk about will not be who they sign or who I think they should sign all of these guys at the same time. But I kind of want to start, though, with let's go back to Dalton here. Who would be your like the first guy you're making a phone call to for as soon as you're allowed to talk to these guys, which we know is before free agency actually started, whatever. Who's your first phone call you're making to, you think?
Not currently on the roster, or
not currently on the roster. We're talking about true free
yeah.
agent additions, right? Because retention, you guys can throw out names you want to retain,
like,
but actual
my first call would definitely be Robert Spillane.
Yeah, because he's in the building already. Yeah, but
yeah.
But as far as we're talking true free agents here, like guys who are not currently on your team in any capacity.
I think mine would probably be. What do you think, Jake?
My first call was Aaron Jones.
Ooh,
I don't hate that.
Okay. Well, I don't hate that either.
I think mine, just because I think at the price point you could get him, mine would probably be Mike Williams. Assuming the Steelers don't keep him around. I think he could be a cheaper play just to get somebody to complement your other receivers there. Just like I said, big body on the outside.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He's played very well this season, and it would be interesting to see if the Chargers would like to keep him. But I would be giving J.K. Dobbins a call because first 2 seasons, yes, he's been rough injury-wise, but I think that was maybe a little like fluky, and he looks fantastic this year. And if I don't know how much he's going to command, and I feel like the Chargers are going to want to keep him, but it also depends on if they feel like Gus Edwards can also be retained cheaper. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. But that's somebody that I would be like, that's a little tasty. That's a little tasty.
Yeah, the main reason I went with Aaron Jones is because I think as a check down option, he can be really valuable to a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
But if we're not talking, I would think my first phone call would probably be to the safety class, just with how stacked it is. And we talked about the need for it. I don't know how you guys feel about Hufanga, because I don't think Holland's going to be available. The Dolphins are going to keep Holland. He is not going to be available. And the 49ers have so many players that they're going to have to try to retain that you're definitely going to be able to steal some of them with commanding a higher contract. That could definitely lock up the back end of the secondary.
See, at safety, I'm bringing back Merrick, and I am bringing back Isaiah Polamau.
That's why I was curious.
Oh, wait, my bad. That's right. We did say quarterback. We did say cornerback, not safety. My bad.
Yeah, cornerback is Speaking
which
of
there's also a lot of safety options there.
My first call, if I'm running free agency, is Travarius Ward of the 49ers.
You can literally flip my entire argument for Ward because there's so many. When you look at any sort of list regarding top free agents, the amount of 49ers on this list is insane.
Yeah, there's a good amount of them
to be able to retain everybody.
I think Ward is somebody you could get away from the Niners because I do think that he's in that not that he's old or anything necessarily, but he's in that right age range where maybe they don't want to commit money to a corner right now. They have a lot of other corners on the roster they drafted. Can't think of his name on top of my head, but I was a big fan of him out of Florida State. For some reason, blanking on his name right now. But he's played well for them. I think you could definitely get Ward to sign away from them, and it wouldn't be anything groundbreaking contract-wise, I don't think. He's been very good for them, obviously, but he would provide a true number one corner for this team that I think they would desperately need. So he's probably the first guy that I call.
He's a true outside guy too, right?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
That's a big thing. Yeah,
that's why my first call. I'm also looking at a guy like DJ Reed of the Jets. Someone who is smaller, so he's going to cost less money. Still, it's weird. He's an outside corner, but he's 5'9", so people are going to not pay him as much. It's a weird thing in the NFL, so he'd probably be a little bit cheaper than Ward would be. So if you want to go, not that money is a big issue for you guys, but if you don't want to commit a ton of money, I think Reed would be a really good fit. If I'm looking at receiver, I love the idea of T. Higgins on this team. I really do. I don't know what the Bengals are going to do with him at this point in terms of, are they going to try to tag and trade him, or are they going to let him hit the market? I really don't know what the Bengals.
Well, they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do with Chase.
That's kind of my thing, right? Yeah. But the point is, I'm not sure how you have to go about acquiring T. Higgins, but I do think that would be an awesome fit as the outside wide receiver in this offense. So.
Yeah. T. Higgins was my second call.
My issue is I think Higgins is going to be 20+ million a year. And I think you're going to, and they have so many guys that right now have been on like sub 3 a year contracts that are now going to be getting 8 to 10 to re-sign them.
So it does matter how much you want to spend this offseason, how much of your cap you're willing to.
And I think just to bring back the guys that I think they have to bring back, especially on the defensive side of the ball, it's going to get costly to go with splashes. I know you guys mentioned running backs. Like, that's where I think, like, if you're going to pay a running back, you know, you just let one walk out. The guy you should have paid just walked out the door.
Right.
I think running back's a great place where I think you could go in the draft, which I think this draft is fantastic for running backs.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into them more. But yeah, those are the top guys I thought of. So some other guys, I'll just throw out names of a couple different positions in the groups. Again, not all these at the same time because it does matter who you prioritize and what position you want to focus on. But going to, like I said, I talked about the corners. I could see, like, if you want to add an edge guy that you think can be a starting caliber player for you, I like the idea of like an Azeez Ojulari from the Giants. He might go back to them, but also could be a guy that's looking for a bigger opportunity. Josh Sweat from the Eagles.
Patrick Graham, sorry.
Yeah, Graham. Sweat from the Eagles, I know is going to be free agent. They might decide not to bring him back. I think he could be a quality starter for you guys if you needed one. Milton Williams on the inside is a pass rusher into the interior defensive line, also from the Eagles. Hasn't had a ton of run there because their interior defensive line has been so stacked, but been a good pass rusher when asked to be one. Already mentioned Higgins. Darius Slayton is kind of like Tucker and him would maybe clash a little bit in terms of the deep target stuff, but he's a good player. I think would be a good starter on the outside. Running backs, I don't think you guys should necessarily pay running backs, but if you did, I would want to get one that is a short-term starter that can then be paired with a rookie that you draft and kind of try to play off of each other for the time being. So you have someone you're confident is going to be a day one starter impact player while also hoping you hit on one in the draft. I'm looking at a James Conner if the Cardinals somehow let him go. I'm looking at, this guy fits the vibe for sure. Najee Harris from Steelers potentially, because I don't think he's coming back personally. Someone like that might cost a little bit of money, but probably on a short-term contract that if you draft somebody and they're really good, you probably can get out of that. Do you
quickly. Reach out to Amari Cooper about a scenario? I know he was traded, but I assume he has to assume that was business and stuff like that. But he will be available.
I like it in that, like, he and Jacoby Myers are both like 1A types.
Mm-hmm.
In that, like, they both need somebody like of their caliber with them. But my only issue is I do think him and Jacoby Myers are very similar in what they bring to the table.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if, like I said, that's why I think you need like more of a big body.
Yeah.
An underrated running back option that for some reason nobody will just give him a chance, even though when he's had the ball, he's been great. Khalil Herbert could be signed for a very cheap deal and provide great value for any team. Like, it's just the fact that it's astonishing.
Yeah, for sure.
And his underutilization in Chicago is just criminal.
Yeah,
yes. Oh, yes.
Now he's a Bengal, so there's that.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on the guys I mentioned there, especially from you two?
I like him. I had a couple of we had a couple of the same players.
I did have a couple. I had a question before we jump into. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jake.
There you
go. Before we jump into kind of draft plan, like kind of what we'd be looking at for what they want to do in the draft. What is the situation at this point with the offensive line in terms of? Do you think that Jackson Powers-Johnson is eventually going to be the center of this team because Andre James has struggled this year?
Yeah,
or do you think? Center. Okay, like long term.
Yeah, he's been playing the last couple of years. I think. I don't know what you think, Jake, but I mean, he's just looked really damn good there, and I think that's a position where you need someone solid, and he's a guarantee of being solid. It might not be his best position, but I think it's easier to figure out other pieces at guard than it is to figure out center.
I agree with that. I think up until this year, Andre James really hasn't been bad. So I could see the Raiders potentially wanting to go another year with him at center and then just kind of see how that goes. But I think whether it's at center or guard, I do think Jackson Powers-Johnson is definitely a future starter. Or
right. So
not a future, he's the starter now. But
yeah, because my thing is, I had 2 or 3 other names that I think could be potential guys you go after if you're trying to shore up a guard spot in particular. If Power Johnson's going to be the center moving forward, the big fish would be Trey Smith. I think that'd be a boon to get him away from the Chiefs, and you add somebody who's a true all-pro level player to your offensive line, because the offensive line is not this team's problem, but I think you could make it even better if you're willing to go out there. And we've seen what teams have done with guards. Like, they want to go out and get these elite guards. And he'd be one, if you could pull him away from the Chiefs, hurts them and helps you a little bit, right? So that's what I'd be looking at. If you want to go cheaper, for sure, which obviously usually you want to try to if you can. I mentioned this name last week, Zach, but Will Freeze, the guard for the Colts, has had a phenomenal season when he's been healthy. And they're probably going to try to retain him, but some team, if the right teams realize how good of a player he's been this year and want to try to take a chance on him, they might be able to offer enough to pull him away. That would be interesting.
Another name we mentioned last week, but not necessarily in a signing aspect, but it would be easy probably to sign him off of this team at a nice veteran and give you good depth. Brandon Scherf will likely be available.
Yeah, I'm not sure with him at this point, like where I'm at with him. But it's not that he isn't an option.
I think his issues might be more of a product of the environment right now, and if you put him in a better scenario and a situation, he could be back up to his play with like Washington and stuff like that. But
potentially,
I mean, Jacksonville is also a hellhole. So
yeah. And then the other name I'll throw out, this guy, because he does have honestly probably center guard flexibility, especially with the recent change he's had. Brady Christensen of the Panthers, if they choose not to retain him, he's shown center guard flexibility past year, so he'd be an interesting piece to add, so you can have a little bit of flexibility there.
This list still has Connor McGovern.
Yeah. Any thoughts on those guys there?
I like those. I think the big thing is utility type offensive lineman. I think the ability, not necessarily to go from guard to center, is as important to me as going from guard to tackle, because I think right tackle is still a question mark. Yeah,
Glaze is. We'll see what happens with him.
I really like Glaze personally.
I do too.
For what he's done, it's hard to gauge whether this is something that's going to be like. Is this as good as he is, or is he going to get better over time? Like, as a 3rd round pick, it's hard to say.
I like. Sorry, you can go to.
I was going to say, I think getting a good swing tackle is important.
Right. That could also definitely make a lot of sense there, too.
I like Glaze at right tackle, and I still like Colton Miller at left tackle. So I have 2 guards that I think would be interesting if they looked at. And that's James Daniels and Tevin Jenkins.
Right. Yeah, Daniels could be had because it seems like the Steelers are not interested in re-signing him. Yeah. So
I think
obviously the Achilles injury, you hope he can recover fully, but
yeah.
Yeah. A guy that I'm curious about, the most Raiders move, of course, Jake, would be to bring back John Feliciano, right? But no, a guy that I would probably be more expensive, maybe Will Hernandez.
Okay.
I wouldn't hate that.
Been a good player last couple of years, right?
Yeah. He's like one of those guys that wasn't great his first couple of years in the league.
Yeah, the Giants are bad though, so
exactly.
Yeah. So that also makes sense. But I think the point is, if you guys couldn't tell, a lot of options the Raiders could eventually go after. A lot of names that are available to them that I think would be helpful to them on both sides of the ball.
I don't think offensive line is a huge priority, honestly, because I do think assuming Powers is healthy and Parham stays
Parham's
healthy.
Been great.
Yeah,
Miller's still a great pass blocker.
They definitely
Miller had a bad year because he was coming off surgery.
A good foundation there. That unit has been destroyed by injuries this year.
Yeah,
so
it's banged up.
The stats regarding the offensive line, I think, are a little bit worse than they actually.
It's really hard to gauge. Yeah, I'm not super worried about the line. Yeah. That's
Also,
why I didn't put a focus on it.
A quarterback running around like a chicken with his head cut off.
Right. Yeah. Let's jump in just talking about what you guys would kind of do draft plan, generally speaking. Like, we don't have to bring up a ton of names. There's, if you have names, there's one name in particular I'm sure we're going to touch on. But I'll start with this one just because I'm curious what you guys think, and you can jump in, from there. First of all, a quarterback of the future, obviously, with your first pick. And probably present, depending on who it is as well, but definitely future. Sanders is obviously the one that everyone is going to talk about for good reason with Shedeur. Yeah, so I have not gotten fully through the quarterbacks yet, so I'm not committal on anything, but I do believe he's going to be my preliminary QB1 at least going into draft season. Mostly because of the lack of high-end talent at the position and also lack of players who I think are going to be ready to play anytime soon in the NFL. Aside.
Yeah, but I do agree that his floor is a lot higher than Cam Ward, but I do also believe that Ward is in a very, very, very difficult situation where he is forced to do so much more than a lot of people that it's forcing some of these mistakes, and that can be possibly coached out a little bit. But again, I do agree that if you have the choice between the two, it should be Sanders.
Yeah.
Yeah. My feeling is Sanders is the only sure thing in this quarterback class. He's the only guy that I think you can really say, like, yeah, you bring back, you get the defense back together, get some competent coaches, and you can realistically be a playoff team in 2 years.
Yeah.
I think Shador's the only guy you can, like, feel extremely confident saying that. Everyone else, you're like, they might need to develop. There's some question marks. But Shador, he is ready to play in the NFL. His mechanics are ready to go.
He's the Jaden Daniels of next year.
In a certain way. I think I talked about this with Dalton. We'll talk more about this when we start our draft show, which should be coming very soon, guys, as well. We'll talk more about that in the future. But I'd liken him a little bit to Teddy Bridgewater in a way, in terms of like my feeling of confidence about him being a quality starter in the NFL. When Bridgewater was healthy, especially earlier in his career before the knee and everything
before
else.
the absolute horrifically that made grown men cry.
Yeah. Right. He was a guy that I thought was going to be a very quality starter that you could win games with and make the playoffs with a good enough roster. And I feel similarly about Sanders at this point. We'll see how much that changes when I watch more of him. But in general, I think you're getting a guy like you said, Dalton, that you feel pretty confident you can build a winning franchise around to some degree.
Yeah.
And he can be a part of the reason that they are successful.
I also think this season was really important for Colorado in general because it helped them grow up a bit.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of those question marks at the beginning of this season, and that was really what was holding back a lot of everybody's being like, "Oh yeah, he's surefire first." Like, yeah. And this season has been very important for them in that aspect as well.
And what were you saying, Dalton? Though, sorry.
But yeah, like, what was I saying?
It was right after I said about like I think you could build a winning franchise around him, and he could be a big a part of why you're successful.
He was going to be a Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah.
That's
my comp kind of right now for him. Yeah.
My comp is similar. I don't know if he'll ever be elite. That's the thing. But like,
right, for sure.
His floor is starter in this league.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts there, Jay?
As long as he's not you don't have to have like this absolutely bust your doors off quarterback to be a successful franchise. Exactly. As long as he's not the reason you're losing games. That like that is the thing. Like that's the thing right now with Miami is I'm looking at these games that Tua is playing. He has not been the reason we've lost the game since he's come back from injury. But there's other problems on that roster. But if he can, if Sanders can be the reason that you're not losing games, but he can also be the reason why you win some, that's best case scenario. That literally is best case scenario for any quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, that's why my comp is actually a guy that was the Raiders quarterback for a decade. Funny how that works out. I think as far as tier goes, I think it could be very similar.
There you go. Fair enough. Yeah. What do you think, Jake?
He just has to become a Raider. After the way that this season has gone and the way that the vibe is around the franchise, it has to change next year. And luckily, I think that, or luckily for the Raiders at least, I think they're going to be in perfect position to draft him because they don't need the first overall pick because that's going to be Travis Hunter. But I think, I don't see how this Raiders team doesn't have the second or first pick in the draft. I mean, I think they're tied for first right now, but they're like fourth off of strength of schedule. But I don't think they win another game this year, I'm just being honest. I don't think they really get close to winning another game. So
it doesn't seem like
it. Even when they're close, they get blown out, like we saw.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
they turn like 7-point losses into 20-point
that
losses.
game was well in hand until 4 minutes in the fourth quarter.
Thinking about the Raiders though, in over the last decade, they kind of needed to have a year like this because there's so the first year Gruden was a coach, it was bad. But aside from that, I mean, there's a whole lot of 7 and 9s, 8 and 8s,
6 and 10, 6
that's
and 11.
part of the reason why they're in quarterback purgatory. That's part of the reason we're having conversations about Gardner Minshew and Jimmy Garoppolo, is because they're not making any moves in terms of like trades or free agency, but they're not drafting high enough. I mean, this last draft, they had the 13th pick and 6 quarterbacks got taken.
Yeah, it's like, well, at that point, you're
you just have to have a season where you are incredibly bad to have a chance to draft a prospect like that. Mm-hmm. And so in that way, I think this season is much needed. But yeah, I mean, I think things are set up perfectly for them to draft Sanders, and I just don't see how they don't, especially with Tom Brady now a part of the team.
I think it's going to be. I do think it's going to end up being Shedeur, but regardless, quarterback of the future is my first priority. Obviously, with your first pick, I think just down the line, like just things that I want to see happen. A secondary pick pretty early, just like someone in the second, especially if you don't get a true outside corner, a free agency that you're confident about for the next couple of years, like putting somebody in that secondary early, a wide receiver in the first 3 rounds at some point, especially an outside guy, especially if you don't sign someone who you expect to be that answer for several years. If it's Mike Williams, that might be your answer for a year, but if it's not someone like that, or if it's someone that is not going to be the starter for 3-4 years, probably try to invest there. At least one running back in the first 4 rounds. You need to bring in talent at that position.
Take Bashaw Tootin. Take Bashaw Tootin.
Oh yeah,
the guy I want is the guy who I think is going to fall to day 2 that I would love to see, and you'll like this, Shane. Nick Singleton.
Okay, I certainly think he will be available at that point in the draft. I do.
If you're talking about wanting to grab a guy that can be you were talking about Aaron Jones and having the ability to have the out of the backfield screen. My God, Tootin is dart. He is dart Tootin good. Like, oh my Lord.
There you go.
I love watching him.
My personal head canon is Travion Henderson. That's my kind of with this team. But mostly because
I like the way he runs.
Yeah, he's also phenomenal pass protector. Just phenomenal pass protector. So he could be a third down back immediately if you want to go for maybe a first and second down guy to complement him, like in phrases or something. He can handle third downs for you, no problem at all. Also good route runner, good pass receiver. And then past that, depth at edge and offensive line, probably maybe look for a swing tackle type, like you were talking about, Dalton, somebody who can play a little bit of either side or something like that. Edge rusher depth, if you don't do that in free agency. Just general depth. I think depth at that point across the board from any positions you want to go to past the first 4 rounds. That's when you want to try to add bodies to those groups. But I think primarily it's quarterback, secondary, receiver, running back. That's kind of who I'm focusing on my first 3 to 4 picks, especially on is those positions.
Yeah.
Any difference in opinions there from you guys?
No, I agree with that. I'd say offensive line, I think maybe more for a swing tackle, I think I'd lean more veteran.
If you can get one, yeah. But I'm thinking if you're taking an offensive lineman down the board, it's somebody you hope can play a couple positions, maybe. Yeah. But yeah, I mean that's my whole thought. I know you guys seem to kind of mostly like what I had to say, so I appreciate that. I'm glad I was able to come to the table with some good stuff, but. We'll do any final thoughts on, overall, our processes, anything that you guys want to throw in there that we didn't mention or you didn't mention about kind of how you'd go forward with this team?
There's definitely some solid pieces. I think the biggest thing missing, as I said earlier, is just you need somebody in the front office and head coach that's going to push this team in an actual direction and identity. And a lot of the issues regarding the roster and the overall play of people is kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah, I think the number one thing for this franchise moving forward is just stability. This is, yet another time that things are getting torn down and rebuilt. And I think there's a lot of things to be excited about with this team. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but there's a lot of things to be excited about. And I think the number one thing, if you draft Shedeur Sanders and he's bad for a year, just don't panic. If you go get a new head coach and he sucks for a year, just don't necessarily. I think patience and just trying to see things through are the number one thing that the Raiders can do. But Mark Davis has not shown that he's capable of having that while he's the owner. So
big opportunity to create stability right now. They have a lot of guys on the roster that they've brought in recently that have played, and that they need to retain. And I'll just run through real quick.
Yes.
Here's the guys they got to keep. Hobbs, I think it's Hobbs, Merrig, and Polmau in the secondary. At linebacker, you got to keep Diablo and Spillane. And up front, I would really try to bring back Adam Butler. Adam Butler's been really impressive. He is a guy that I think is a great anchor. And I would also, honestly, Malcolm Kuntz's injury is probably the best thing that could have happened because he's going to be much cheaper and much easier to retain. And I think
they should do
diamond in the rough.
Yeah, I do think Kuntz should come back. If you don't bring him back, I think it's especially important to go after one of the edges I talked about or someone in that ilk because you need somebody opposite of Crosby because Wilson is probably going to be his best version as an inside-out guy occasionally. Yeah. If you do get anything from him, it probably can't be as a full-time starting edge. So finding someone opposite of Crosby.
Yeah, I don't understand the Raiders.
That could be the whole thing. I don't understand the Raiders.
I said, come on.
he played on the inside last year, and he looked like significantly better on the inside. And then this year they want to run it back.
Because he's very linear athlete.
Rusher.
He's very linear athlete.
They moved him to the edge out of necessity more than anything.
Yeah, more so. Yeah. But that'll happen to you. But that's our full kind of rebuild on how we think the Raiders will do it. Will they do it this way? No. They won't. There will be something they do that probably messes up. I'd be very funny if they completely follow one of our thought processes and then it absolutely fucking sucks. Because then we'd be able to be like, well, I told you so, but also I told myself so, I guess too. Damn.
And that's when we can look at you and say, this is why we're not a NFL GM.
Now, if it works out, put it on the resume.
But let's be clear. We know what's going to happen.
If the Raiders followed one of our plans personally, I would honestly be thrilled because that would be more promising than the.
That's the sad part is I do agree with that, but it is what it is. But go ahead, Dalton.
But we know what's going to happen with all these guys. They should be bringing back. They're going to bring back none of them, and Tom Telesco is going to go on one of his famous spending sprees and overpay 6 guys, and it's going to be a disaster.
If you ever pay the right 6 guys, maybe it'll be all right. But are you going to do that? Probably not.
Until they all get hurt.
You sign Travis where he plays 7 games in 2 years. Something like that. Yeah, I don't know.
They'll sign Mike Williams, but they'll give him 3 years, $50 million.
Yeah, 3 years, $50 million. He'll catch 3 deep balls the rest of the year for the Steelers, and they'll all be perfect and awesome. And then they'll be like, "Oh, that's my guy. I'm getting him back." It's like, all right, Mike.
Yeah. You still got it.
You still got it, Mike.
That's the thing. Now the new GM has to remake the roster in his image.
Right.
And the cycle will continue forever.
And ever again. But no. Hoping better for you guys in the future is fans from across the way. But that'll do it for us this week. Next week we will be tackling the Giants. That is a given. We will be doing that. But what's up, Zach?
My only other addition, and it's not even football related. Kendrick Lamar released an album today. Go listen to it. It's incredible. I listened to the whole thing.
He did.
Go listen to
it. I have only listened to the first half. I will be finishing it later.
It's a great thing to wake up and see on my phone.
You're like, wait a second, what the hell is going on? No, but yeah, definitely do that too. We will be back next week doing the Giants. We'll definitely have to tackle them next, considering